All right, everybody, I have 6:30 on this Saturday night, so thanks for joining me for the weekend edition here of what is now the briefing for Tropical Storm Isaias. Tropical Storm Isaias had a tough day today. A lot of dry air entrained into the storm once it got to the east of Abaco Island in the Bahamas and along the South Florida coast. So a lot of that dry air eating away at a good portion of the storm this afternoon, but we do expect convection to pick back up again overnight. So this may be a brief respite to tropical storm status before increasing again to possibly hurricane status maybe in the coming hours. But for now, Tropical Storm Isaias, this is the 6:30 p.m. briefing for today, Saturday, August 1st. Again, a slightly slower pace for the storm, so pushing those arrival times back once again. But again, increasing confidence, we will see some impacts from the storm, and so we'll get into those. Have to have this. There we go. And so right now we have increasing confidence with as far as the impacts go, as far as wind and marine for sure. It does look like we're going to be on the right side of that storm. And so with that being the case across eastern North Carolina, there is a slightly higher potential for tornadoes. And it's important to remember that those can begin with the very outer rain bands. So we're looking potentially a little bit earlier with onset of some of that. Surge, rainfall, flooding, and river flooding are all a little bit lower there. As far as the overview goes, Tropical Storm Isaias has a current intensity of 70 miles per hour. So that's down slightly, just below hurricane strength. So they did bring it back to that tropical storm. As far as impacts here across eastern North Carolina, increased swell, rip currents, that has been ongoing and will continue through the weekend. So again, if you are one of our partners that helps us message that for the beaches, we would love to continue to get that message out, as beaches were pretty populated today. A lot of boaters out there as well in the waters. But as we move later into the weekend, the swell will continue to increase as the storm approaches from the south. Confidence in the forecast track is high at this time. The track models are packed very tightly together, and so the Hurricane Center forecast that you see here in the cone, we have high confidence in that. The only problem here is you'll notice is it is following the land, and so just a slight shift to the west or the east does change things quite a bit depending on where this storm decides to eventually make landfall across the southeast coast. At this time, the current forecast has it making landfall somewhere near Myrtle Beach around 2 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. And so, but again, with each forecast package, that could shift slightly one way or the other. Again, rip currents are our most immediate threat. But as far as tropical storm wind speed probabilities go, the chances continue to increase as the storm moves up the coast. And they could begin as early as sometime Monday evening. That would be the earliest time of arrival. But with the storm continuing to slow, it's looking maybe more like a most likely scenario of sometime on Tuesday morning. The 50-knot threshold is increasing as well, especially along the coast. So if you're one of our partners who uses that as a threshold, that certainly is coming into play as well. Again, here's that earliest reasonable time of arrival. We've been able to zoom in a little bit here, and you can see Monday 8 p.m. looks like the earliest time of arrival for somewhere in the Wilmington area. It'd be sometime after that for the Crystal Coast, and then even later for the Outer Banks. But the most likely time of arrival is probably sometime Tuesday morning. It could be early morning hours, so before sunrise. So keep an eye out for that as you go you know, a lot of these storms, they come in, and then we have to remember that the impacts can begin at night. Maximum sustained winds, if you've been on these briefings from the beginning, you'll notice that these are quite a bit lower than in our previous briefings, and that is due to that westward shift of the track. With a landfall now around Myrtle Beach, there's a little bit more land for the storm to go through before it gets here, and that scenario would bring these winds down a bit. However, if that track does decide to go offshore, you know, that scenario would ramp the winds back up. So this is not a time to let our guard down. We have to make sure that we keep paying attention to subsequent forecasts and not get caught up in the numbers too much. And here's the maximum wind gusts. So you can see strong tropical storm force winds here. And that's pretty much the same across all of eastern North Carolina at this point. So nobody here is out of the woods at this point. That's the main takeaway there. And we're going to start introducing these threat graphics. This is for impacts due to wind, and right now we have an elevated threat across all of eastern North Carolina. This may become more refined as the storm moves up the coast and we get some more details, but we wanted to introduce these graphics here as we're getting closer to the time when we'll probably see tropical storm watches and things like that issued over the next several forecast packages. As far as rainfall is concerned, again, if you've been watching these briefings, these numbers are coming down, and you'll notice the highest amounts shifted to the west. So now the western portion of our forecast area has the highest amounts of rain, and over here in the Outer Banks, the lowest amounts. Again, with a forecast track shifting back to the east, those amounts could come back up. And so with that, here's impacts from flooding rain. And again, we're keeping much of the area with the potential for some moderate flooding, especially if this rain occurs in a very short period of time. And we're also going to start to introduce here tornado threat graphics. At this time, with this kind of a track, it looks like much of the right side of the storm, which is where tornadoes would be more favorable, would be about from Highway 17 and eastward. And then there is a threat for storm surge as well. Not a lot of detail on this at this point, but again, as we get more consensus on where this thing is actually going to go, these graphics will become more refined and more useful for you over the next couple of forecast cycles.